more and more pesticides, more and more fertilizers, that will not help. Already we know the repercussions of the Green Revolution. And the legendary Swaminathan himself has said that there were many negatives of the Green Revolution, which caused soil degradation, which caused problems like desertification and all. And eventually, finally, this will result in reduction in production of agriculture production and increasing our dependency. So these are the issues. And you see that higher, some of the participants have kept their mic open.
सर आप अपना वो कर लीजिए, अनम्यूट कर लीजिए. मैंने सबको कर दिया म्यूट, आप अपना अनम्यूट कर दीजिए सर.
So
yes.
So the problem of, I will focus today on the land degradation and soil salinity. How the use of chemicals is impacting the land, how soil salinity is an increasing problem day by day, and how droughts are causing problems like, dependency on animal meat and creation of such pandemics. So in a report by Food and Agriculture Organization, it has been projected that food production needs to be increased by 70% by 2050. 70% by 2050 to meet the demand of increasing population, food requirement of increasing population. So we need agriculture, alternative agriculture strategies, and which should be sustainable. We can't depend upon the chemicals, agrochemicals only. You see, in this slide, it depicts another aspect. Although our human population is increasing, food production is increasing, meat production is increasing, but still 1 out of 9 people are undernourished. This is another problem. Although we talk about that the technical advances, we talk about increased agriculture production, we talk about that we have huge breakthroughs, we have made huge breakthroughs in terms of you see, if artificial intelligence and space research and all, but still 1 out of 9 people on the planet is undernourished. Undernourished means 1 out of 9 of humans on the planet doesn't get enough food, enough calories, enough vitamins, enough minerals. Now these 1 out of 9 people suffer from several diseases also related to deficiency of one nutrient or other. Now, and these are the most vulnerable people on the planet as well. If a pandemic like COVID-19 strikes, the immunocompromised, the undernourished people are the most susceptible to such diseases. So despite of our claims that we have increased food production, that we have made such a huge breakthroughs in technology, it is very means another situation, that a parallel situation, if we observe that 1 out of 9 on planet Earth are undernourished. Now you see the food basket in 2006 and in 2050. 2006 food basket and 2050, it is more than double. The requirement of food will be more than double in what it was in 2006. So we have to increase the production. We have to increase the agriculture production with sustainability, with the green methods, with the organic methods, because pesticides and all have their own several impacts on the environment, several impacts on the soil fertility, Pesticides and fertilizers have caused huge problems in the agriculture systems, agro ecosystems. So we have to go for sustainable methods. So with increasing population, there are huge challenges to the food security. There will be more land requirement. Of course, now we cannot go for deforestation. For more land requirement for production, we cannot just cut down the forests. Already we are facing the music because of the cut down of forest because of deforestation. I can tell you, mankind, humans have destroyed 60% of the forest that was present before industrialization and before setup of big cities and all. 60% of forests are already gone from earth. Only 40% are left. So we cannot destroy the rest of the 40% of the forest. We should increase the forest cover. And this is the one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals also, to increase the forest cover. So we cannot cut down the forest further. That will be a huge catastrophe if we cut down the forest. That will create huge problems. And some scientists and some researchers believe that COVID-19 has a direct relationship with the cut down of forests, because these wild animals and humans interaction is increasing, while human animal conflict is increasing. And because of this increase in human animal conflict, chances of transfer of viruses from wild animals to humans is increasing. So we cannot cut down the forest. Already some in some countries wildlife meat is being served, but that is creating problems, like what happened this in Wuhan. This virus erupted and now is a huge pandemic, one of the severe pandemics, most severe of the pandemics in last 100 years. Now see, so we cannot go for that we should cut down the forests. Second point is climate change, another anthropogenic activity directly related to human activity, climate change, global warming. This is posing huge pressure on the agriculture sector. Climate change, it is predicted that by 2050, temperature of Earth can rise by up to 3 degrees centigrade. Now, this rise in temperature can result in land, even shrinkage of the land. Coastal areas are in trouble because of the melting of the ice caps. I have seen some videos where some parts of the Bombay, which around 50 years before, people were living near the sea at Bombay, and now those areas are under the sea. So there are examples from other cities also from around the world. So these cities or areas, coastal regions, already they are in trouble. Small countries, very small countries like Maldives, Mauritius, several island countries in Pacific Ocean are in trouble because of increasing water level, because of the melting of the ice at the North and South Pole and even at Himalayas. So this will result, this is a direct impact on food security because that will cause shrinkage of the land. Another problem is increasing natural disasters due to climate change. Climate change, if we see the graph, there is a graph, if you see United Nations have sustainable development goals and all, if you see those graphs, there is increase in natural disasters in last 30 years or so. These natural disasters include droughts, floods, huge incessant rains. Suddenly there are huge amount of rain in a particular area. Suddenly there are droughts in a particular region, repeated droughts. Now this is also causing problem for the production, for the agriculture production, because droughts and floods will decrease the productivity. You know, a couple of years back, what happened in Kerala, not even couple of years, less than that. In Kerala, there were huge floods, and that resulted in the soil degradation because the saline water from the oceans reached the soil, went inside and caused. Now, just a few days back, there was a huge cyclone in Bay of Bengal, in West Bengal. And because of that, the ocean water of Bay of Bengal entered the agriculture fields also into the land, and cause salinity. So this salinity is increased due to such activities when ocean water mixes with the fertile soil, like happened in Kerala and Bengal. And these disasters are increasing due to climate change. So this is another challenge for the food security. Third one is the soil quality and fertility. I already mentioned that problems like in use of agrochemicals like fertilizers and pesticides has caused huge problems in soil fertility. Several of the very fertile regions of our planet are now not that fertile. Even Punjab is a very good example. In Punjab, you see, uh, fertility of the soil has gone down in last few years because of huge use of chemicals like fertilizers and pesticides. So we cannot rely on chemicals, agrochemicals for increasing the productivity, because ultimately it will lead to soil degradation. Also, these chemicals, these pesticides, production of urea, production of fertilizers is carbon intensive, means results in water pollution, air pollution, release of greenhouse gases, production of fertilizers and pesticides. So otherwise also production of pesticides and uh, these fertilizers is not good for the environment, let alone to apply them. Their production is also not good. It is carbon intensive, results in carbon emission, and increases the greenhouse gas emission into the environment. So in this way also production of these chemicals is not very good. So increase in soil salinity, the last point, increase in soil salinity is another big problem because of all these faulty practices. You know, I told you just now, natural disasters, climate change, use of chemicals, faulty agriculture practices, faulty irrigation systems, all these are causing increase in soil salinity. So food security is a big issue. You see in this graph, this is the dotted line. This is the food demand. This is the food demand, and 2050, this is the spot, you see, and current food production is this orange line. So uh, orange line is the current food production, and you see this is the demand, the dotted line. So there is a huge gap, and this gap is increasing. If you see, this gap is increasing year by year, day by day. So the way population is increasing, food demand is increasing, and the gap of food production and food demand is increasing. And salt, I'm coming back to the topic which I am going to discuss today. Salt stress is one of the most serious matters which we have to tackle. Soil salinity is the most important cause of land degradation, and we have to tackle with it. And friends, this soil salinity is an active process. Active process means it is increasing day by day, spreading globally. I can give you example of one. You know, there was in Central Asia. I gave you just two examples of Kerala and West Bengal, how saline water entered the agriculture land. Another example is in Central Asia. These examples which I am giving are direct examples of anthropogenic related activities, direct blatant examples. In Central Asia, there is a sea. I should say there was a sea known as Aral Sea, which was spanned in 2 or 3 countries. Aral Sea was a huge sea. Now only 10% of the sea is left. Only 10%. 90% of the sea is gone. And you know what is left? When the sea has dried down, the salt, the saline soil, huge amount of salt is left over as the water evaporates. And this salt is spreading in the nearby countries and all around with wind and all, making the soil saline. So this is a very Good example. Now this shrinkage of soil sea, Aral Sea, is only because of human activities. And 90% of that sea has dried up, resulting in huge saline soils. Concentration of salt is so high that even the degradation, the normal process of biodegradation is hampered in that soil. That is the uh, magnitude of salinity that is present there, and that is spreading in the nearby regions because of wind. That soil is that salt is spreading all around, increasing the saline region on the globe. So soil salinity is one of the very important reasons of land degradation. It is very active and process which is continuing very quickly, and if corrective measures are not taken, then this soil salinity can result in 30% land loss in next 25 years and 50% loss by the year 2050. This soil salinity. 50% of the agricultural land can be lost to salinity if we do not take corrective measures. Already 7% of the land area on earth, that is equivalent to 20 times the size of the France, suffers from soil salinity. 7%, that is huge. 7% of the earth's land area already is saline, and this is increasing day by day. This clearly shows that uh, increase in human population and land degradation, anthropogenic activities, faulty agriculture practices, other problems, climate change and all have resulted in increased salinity throughout the globe. You see this graph, it clearly correlates. You see soil salinity, population increase, this dark blue line, salinity is increasing very quickly, and carbon dioxide emission. So greenhouse gas emission, soil salinity, human population, all are correlated. All are increasing at the almost same pace. So this graph clearly gives a, you can say, an indication that where we are going, what is happening in terms of population increase, salinity, and carbon dioxide emission. You see now this is the global map depicting the human-induced soil degradation. Red zones are the most severely degraded regions of the globe. And in India, there are red zones. We are here somewhere. Lucknow, I am from Lucknow at present. So this also comes in this red zone. Big part of Uttar Pradesh. I will show you the India map. Now you see, we classify salinity levels. If it is less than 2 EC, if EC is less than 2, then we say the soil is non-saline. But if it is 2 to 4, then it is slightly saline. 4 to 8 is moderately saline. 8 to 16 is very saline, and more than 16 is highly saline. And we have worked in this region 8 to 16. I will show you where we have done experiments and where we have worked in the fields, in the villages with the farmers. Those regions in central Uttar Pradesh come under very saline. I will show you the photographs and the graphs and how we have worked on that region. These are the global, this is the global distribution of salt affected land. I will skip this. This is the, you see, global distribution in million hectares, continent wise. So Asia, you see, Asia region is showing the biggest area which comes under the impact of soil salinity. 3,107 million hectares. Although Asia is bigger, but then this area is also much bigger than all of the other continents. Much bigger, even more than double. In if you say. Now you come. This is the map of India in terms of soil salinity, taken from Central Soil Salinity Research Institute. You see the black dots depicting the soil salinity. And I was talking about central Uttar Pradesh, and even it is in eastern Uttar Pradesh, Western Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, even Punjab is becoming saline now. That was I was telling you about that even the soil, Punjab was considered as the most fertile region of India. Now it is becoming saline due to the use of these pesticides. You see, it is obvious coastal regions, you see coastal regions, it is obvious to be saline in Gujarat, but in central Uttar Pradesh, this is Gangetic belt. These black dots come under Gangetic belt. This was also very fertile once upon a time, Gangetic belt. It was the most productive, apart from Punjab, this was the most productive area of our country, Gangetic belt, now becoming saline because of all these problems which I have already discussed. Now we come to this plant growth promoting rhizobacteria. This was about how salinity, I told you just in the first 15 or 20 minutes, how salinity is impacting, how human population is impacting the pollution, and how these problems, anthropogenic activities, are resulting in soil degradation and several other problems, including I again will say, including COVID-19. COVID-19 is directly related to human population, anthropogenic activities, and the degradation of the environment which we have done. Now, these plant growth promoting rhizobacteria, I hope you all know, these are generally, these bacteria are found in the rhizosphere, associated with the plants. They form symbiotic relationship with the plants, mutualistic relationship. They have the plant in plant provides them nutrients as well. In the roots, around the root region known as rhizosphere. The term PGPR was given by Kloeper, and now we know that PGPR, how they work. They work by direct mechanisms. They can help the plant. They can go for zinc solubilization. They can go for nutrient acquisition, direct mechanisms, phosphate solubilization. That means they can provide nutrients to the plant like zinc, phosphate, nitrogen fixation. With the help of cytophores, they can help in chelating iron or several other metal ions. Other direct mechanisms include production of phytohormones like indole acetic acid, gibberellic acid. So in this way, they directly help to promote the plant growth. So these are direct mechanisms, and the PGPR which follow these mechanisms can be called as direct PGPRs. They directly enhance the plant growth by these mechanisms. Then on the other hand, there are indirect mechanisms. In indirect mechanisms, these PGPR, they control the phytopathogens. They directly do not increase the growth of the plant, but by controlling the phytopathogens, they help the plant, like by production of SCN, hydrogen cyanide, lytic enzymes, antibiotics, induce systemic resistance. Now, by these methods, these PGPR control the phytopathogens and help the plant indirectly. So plant is protected from the phytopathogens. And so these are known as indirect mechanisms, and these PGPR which depict these activities are known as indirect PGPR. Now, direct PGPRs are generally used as biofertilizers or biostimulants, and indirect PGPR are used as biopesticides. So, and this slide shows how PGPR can help in combating abiotic stress. Means how now we are using them in show you my work, which is related to controlling the abiotic stress. Stress imposed by abiotic factors like drought, heat, salinity, temperature, I mean heat, I mean temperature, salinity. Now this, these PGPR can help the plant under abiotic stress conditions of drought, heat, salinity. They can produce volatile compounds, ACC deaminase is one enzyme, growth hormones, antioxidants, exopolysaccharides. All these factors, by releasing, they can help the plant and control and help them to combat the abiotic stresses. So direct PGPRs provide nutrients. Indirect PGPRs, they help protect from phytopathogens. And now we are working on the PGPRs which help the plant in combating abiotic stresses, which help the plant from the stresses of drought or salinity or temperature. So this is another aspect which is coming up, apart from direct and indirect PGPR. Earlier we used to say only direct and indirect PGPR. Now we say that they can help in combating abiotic stresses. Now these are the other mechanisms. Now we say about how they help the plants. These PGPR, not only by direct and indirect mechanisms, they also help in bioremediation. They can help in pollution degradation, rhizoremediation, in which plant and microbes, rhizosphere microbes, they combine and help in degradation of pollutants. So they help in bioremediation. We can specifically call it rhizoremediation. Bioaccumulation, bioaccumulation of metals and all, heavy metals. There are several papers, research studies, and success stories are we can just available. If you search, where heavy metals have been uh, sequestered from the soil with the help of microorganisms and the plants, biodegradation, stress management, abiotic stress and biotic stress, both PGPR help, and they are also going to help. They also help in combating climate change. Now, this is another aspect I was telling you just now. Climate change is one of the biggest issues which we are facing at the planet, on the planet at present. And I say that, we are facing COVID-19 pandemic, but I say that environmental pandemic is already going on since last few decades, and nobody is caring about that. Nobody is listening to that. Nobody is paying heed to that. The environmental pandemic, which is happening all around us, all around the globe, due to human activities, due to anthropogenic activities. And this environmental pandemic is the reason of pandemics like COVID-19. I don't know. We should understand this. One of our articles on COVID-19 has been published just now on this issue only, that we have to control the environmental pandemic to control pandemics like COVID-19. So combating climate change, PGPR can help in combating climate change. Now, how this can happen? In degraded lands, in degraded soils, the biomass, the microbial biomass or the humus is very low. Organic soil, organic matter is very low. If you go and see the saline soils, I will show you the photographs. You see here, white. These are original photographs of the saline regions in Uttar Pradesh, UP, around Lucknow and Kanpur. You see white patches like this, very low on organic matter. You see no growth, bush, almost some bushes here and there, no agriculture growth, no proper agriculture growth. Farmers are afraid to plant crops in such, because the productivity is very low in such fields. So low organic matter, very low organic matter, very high salinity, very low soil organic matter, very low soil microbial biomass. This is resulting in release. Now, where has this organic matter gone in last few years? This organic matter has degraded and the carbon sink is gone into the atmosphere, carbon CO2. Carbon is not present here in the soil, which it should have been. If we can observe the pictures, I have pictures from the past 30 years or 40 years back, 50 years back. These were not such barren lands at that point of time, 50 years back or so. They were not as saline that they have become. So we now, coming to our work, we go and collect microbes from these regions only. The last slide I showed you, this one. So we go in these areas in central Uttar Pradesh, around Kanpur, Lucknow, and collect microorganisms from rhizosphere, from the arid regions, from the saline regions, from the plants wildly growing there, and these are very saline regions. Class 3. I showed you one table where class 3 soil, this is very saline, and we have isolated several PGPR from these regions, plant growth promoting rhizobacteria from the soil of the wildly growing plants. And now I will tell you that about only the two important PGPRs which I am going to tell you the story about today. Although we have diverse type of PGPRs with us, not only Pseudomonads, not only Rhizobia, there are different types, so many types of different varieties and species and genera which we have obtained from these regions. But I will discuss today only about two because we have a limitation of time and I cannot go on. I will take some other class on other bacteria and other organisms. I will discuss about Pseudomonads and Rhizobia today, which we have obtained from these soils. These fluorescent Pseudomonads, I can tell you, these are the most diverse and most commonly present in these soils, most commonly in the rhizosphere. Amongst the culturables, I'm talking about the culturables. Of course, I'm not talking about the non-culturables. We get them, the rhizosphere soil, we culture them in the lab. And among the culturables, fluorescent Pseudomonads are the most dominant group on nutrient agar, on other media, LB and all. So we have a huge library of fluorescent Pseudomonads which we have obtained from these regions. Several strains, several of them we have submitted in culture collection centers in India and abroad. Now these Pseudomonads, if you search the literature, why they are dominant? Because they are catabolically very versatile. They have excellent root colonizing abilities. They have the capability to produce a wide range of metabolites, which I was talking about direct and indirect PGPR just a few minutes back. I can tell you fluorescent Pseudomonads can act as direct PGPR. Fluorescent Pseudomonads can act as indirect PGPR. Fluorescent Pseudomonads can act as stress ameliorators. They can help in combating abiotic stresses also. So they are very diverse because they produce very different kind of secondary metabolites, huge array of secondary metabolites. You can search my reviews on that. Secondary metabolites from fluorescent Pseudomonads. We have published some reviews on that in very good journals. You can go through them. I will not go in detail. So, and I told you they help the plant to withstand biotic and abiotic stresses. They can help plant in reducing the soil pollution through rhizoremediation, and they can also get involved in biodegradation. So this huge versatility, huge array of properties which these fluorescent Pseudomonads possess, I think because of these, they are the most dominant PGPR in the rhizosphere, even in saline and extreme conditions. Now, this is how they look on the plates. I suppose that all of you must have seen, but for those who have not seen fluorescent Pseudomonads on growing on the plates, these are the plates of fluorescent Pseudomonads. If you can see, this is how they appear on nutrient agar and even on other. There is one media fluorescent agar. This is now I will come to the success story. Amongst all, we have a huge library of fluorescent Pseudomonads. Then I will tell you the success story which we obtained using these two strains, EK1 and PF23. Two fluorescent Pseudomonads, both obtained from Kanpur Dehat from very saline soils. And you see, all this work is published. These Pseudomonads show a variety of secondary metabolites. These Pseudomonads show even antagonism against a very deadly phytopathogen, which we checked in the laboratory, Macrophomina faeculina. Why we checked Macrophomina faeculina? Because this was very endemic to these regions from where we isolated, from where we have done these experiments. I will show you the experiments on different field crops. Macrophomina faeculina causes charcoal rot in a number of diseases, a number of crops, and it is very endemic to these regions in central Uttar Pradesh. So therefore, we have selected this, and these strains were very effective against. They were not only, salt tolerant. They show a variety of metabolite production, and they were also effective in controlling a phytopathogen. So biotic stress abiotic stress and plant growth promotion under saline conditions. This is what they were capable of, these fluorescent pseudomonads. This is a plate of Macrofauna faciolina, or the control plate, and you see how Macrofauna faciolina can impact the crop in saline regions. It can completely destroy the crops. This is a huge pathogen, phytopathogen, which can cause charcoal rot in a number of crops. There is an example of sunflower and chickpea. It can destroy whole fields. Now you see, in lab trials, lab experiments, this Pseudomonas strain, you see the zone of inhibition on this plate. Macrofauna, I showed you the control plate just a minute before, this one. And now you see the huge zone of inhibition, antagonistic activity of this Pseudomonas. It's a very, these strains which we selected, which I am going to show you today, these were very effective against this phytopathogen. Both of these, EK1 and PF23. This is the electron micrograph of deformed hypha of these Macrofauna faciolina. All this work is published in different very good journals: Current Microbiology, Symbiosis, Environmental Sustainability. You see, under salinity also, you see, under saline conditions also, this strain is showing very good inhibition of the phytopathogen. This Macrofauna faciolina, which causes charcoal rot in a number of crops, is salt tolerant itself. Therefore, it is to these saline regions. And this bacteria is inhibiting even up to 400 millimolar NaCl concentration. This bacteria, EK1 and PF23, are inhibiting up to 500 millimolar salt concentration in pellets. They are inhibiting this Macrofauna faciolina, which causes charcoal rot in a number of crops. Now, what we did next in the experiment, we isolated, we got the metabolites. We purified the metabolites of these bacteria. We grow these bacteria in the lab. We purified the metabolites, and you know, I am showing this slide to you, all of you, but that doesn't mean that is that simple. It is very complicated. It is not. It requires a lot of work. Finally, we came out and we could see that two of the metabolites, in case of PF23 strain, EPS was working as a biocontrol agent, metabolite, and in the case of other strain, EK1, pyocyanin was working as a biocontrol agent. Now we have come down to these two metabolites after a huge lot of work in the laboratory. It is not very, means we find out these metabolites in a day or two. It took a lot of time, a lot of experiments. We prepared mutants also, which we checked in the laboratory only. We never use these mutants in the field, only check them in the laboratory. So in case of PF23 strain, EPS negative mutant was not working, which confirmed. And in case of EK1, pyocyanin mutant was not working. We have to prepare several mutants, and out of those, these were selected, and we find out that which metabolite is working. All this work is published in different journals. So you see, EK1 salt tolerance up to 1550 millimole, that is equivalent to 9.3, huge 9.3% NaCl concentration. EPS production was the main character for PF23, Sidro4 and EPS production were the main characters. And then we prepared bioformulations and went for using the metabolites and the bacteria. We have prepared bioformulation using the metabolites and the bacteria both. We have purified the metabolites by production in the laboratory. We have also used the bacterial cells and checked them in field trials. Before field trials, we did the tube assay in the lab. We did the pot trials, but I'm not going to show all those experiments. I'm coming directly to the field trials. But we only went to the field trials after doing several pot and tube assays in the laboratory. It was not that we directly went for the field trial. First, we confirmed with tube assay and field trials or pot trials. Then when the results were very good in the pot trials and tube assay, then only we went for these field trials. So you see chickpea, we did experiment on chickpea. This is the tube assay. You see in this slide, you can see the tube in vitro tube assay. Now this is the field trial of chickpea. We have prepared bioformulation using EK1 Pseudomonas. The salt tolerance of chickpea, the variety which we selected was 150 millimolar, and the bacteria which we used resulted in 77% reduction in the disease incidence. I will show you the next slide. This is the graph. You see, this is control EK. This is the bacteria, second one EK1, EKI, and here we use metabolite, only metabolite, not bacteria. And in the last, we used both bacteria and metabolite. So this increase, you see, control and bacteria and metabolite, huge difference in productivity, in root length, shoot length, dry weight, and this is the yield. You see the increase more than double in saline region soils. Next, we did experiment on sunflower. This was another strain. You see how I told you that sunflower can be impacted by Macrophomina fasciolina infection. Whole crop is destroyed. If Macrophomina infects sunflower, sometimes the whole field is destroyed and there is zero productivity in some cases. This what we did, the field trial. I will show you. I will skip this slide. This is the field. This is the farmer's field. We took it from farmers. And you know, these farmers are in very troubled situation. We went and met them. These farmers in Kanpur region, they are very poor. Their productivity is very low in these regions, in saline regions, very saline soil. Even some farmers have become laborers. They do not go for farming now because the productivity is so low that it is no use to put the efforts, put the money, and you do not get anything. So these farmers are in trouble. So we met them. They readily agreed. They very easily agreed. They readily agreed to give us their land for this experiment because they were otherwise also not cultivating anything. You see this we conducted the field experiment in this farmer's field. You see, they are growing nothing. All wild bushes are growing in this saline region. This is control. And you see this one. This is the bacteria which we have used as for seed coating. Bacteria and its metabolite. If you see in the last slide, this one. This is the bacterial treatment. And here it is in the next slide. I have added this slide because some people don't believe that this can happen. When I showed this slide in some conferences, they said that this is not possible. You are not showing a correct slide. You are not showing the same field. Then I added this slide, and it's clearly visible. You see in the same field how the bacteria how this bacteria and its metabolite worked for this sunflower crop. And you know, unfortunately, I have not added that slide in this. You see this production of sunflower has increased. Again, bacteria and its metabolite, and this is control. They are working wonderfully, increasing the dry weight, the yield by more than 2 times in very saline soil. Unfortunately, I missed one slide in this PPT. After 5 years, after 3 or 4 we have continuously used bioinoculants in this field only. In this one, we have continuously used our bioinoculants since last 3-4 years. And now if you go to this region, if you ever come to Lucknow or Kanpur, if you ever come to meet me, I will take, if you plan, we can make a trip. I took some of the scientists and some of my scholars to this area. Now this field has become quite green. The soil biomass has improved. The soil microbial biomass has improved. Soil organic matter has improved. And this has become a very good green patch now. Earlier this farmer from whom we have taken this field was not growing anything, and nowadays he's growing, you know, even vegetables, very sensitive vegetables which are very sensitive to salinity. They are growing those now on that field. So it is a very good success story. How we can use microbes to remediate saline soils to grow, to increase the yield. Now I'm coming to another aspect. I know almost it is 12:30 now. I will try to wind up in 5 or 10 minutes. Yes, Govind took 10 minutes for introduction, so I will take those 10 minutes extra. So rhizobia, now I come to the second story. We have also obtained several rhizobial strains from these soils. And I can tell you several of these rhizobial strains are novel because these areas have not been exploited properly. So we isolated rhizobia from wild legumes, and some of these strains AB3, LB2 have been submitted. Some of these strains, some of these novel strains from plants like wild growing legumes like Sesbania, Abrus, Leucaena, all these have been submitted to MTCC, ATCC, and NBAIM, MAU. We have selected two of those for this study, for this PPT, AB3 and LB2. One is Rhizobium pascense, other is Bergeringia, and both these, you see, wild growing legumes, pictures of wild growing legumes in these regions. And these are again salt tolerant, AB3 rhizobia and salt tolerance. That is a wonderful combination. Nitrogen fixation under salt tolerance, under high salinity. And this we have identified. Some of them are novel strains. I will not go in detail. These papers are published. We selected these rhizobial strains based on several characteristics. Two of these strains showing phosphate solubilization, siderophore production, IEA production, EPS production, zinc solubilization. Now we check siderophore production. We have, this is very interesting slide. We have this is a new method for detection of siderophore production, quantitative estimation, which we have given for the first time. This is a modified method of Spin and Kneeland. If those people who know about Spin and Kneeland method of siderophore production in laboratory to check the production of siderophore, we have modified it to microplate method. At one go, you can check 96 strains by 96 plate. At one go, you can check 96 strains with very little amount of media. This is a very interesting method. I think you should adopt, all of you who are working on siderophores and all EGPRs, you should adopt this method. This is published. And you can check 96, only very little amount of broth, chromazerol S, and is required. Chromazerol S broth is very costly, and this will save your money. This will save pollution. And this will save time, 96 strains at one time. This is a new method which we gave from our laboratory and it is published. So coming back to salt tolerant PGPR, we check them against, you see the amount of EPS these PGPR, these rhizobia are producing. Huge amount of exopolysaccharides they are producing. This paper are published. We have tried to identify these exopolysaccharides. Some novel exopolysaccharides are also there. We checked them on lettuce. Several crops we have checked. I am showing you the example of lettuce. Lettuce is not a legume. It is a very important vegetable crop which is coming up very quickly in India also. India is the 5th biggest producer of lettuce nowadays. Lettuce is used in so many, is a raw vegetable, rich in minerals, rich in nutrients, very rich in antioxidants. So very important vegetable crop, and also very important cash crop, because it is being used by in making burgers and pizzas and also Domino's and McD's and Burger Kings. All they use lot of lettuce. Lettuce is also used as salad, and it is not a legume. But we checked this lettuce in saline soil, 8.2 EC. In saline soil, we checked rhizobia with this lettuce, and wonderful results were obtained. And you see increase in leaf width, leaf dry weight, root length, shoot length, all because of this use of these bacteria, this rhizobia in lettuce, which is a non-legume. I am again repeating. Increase in antioxidant activity. This paper is published now, and I can tell you this has resulted in biofortification of lettuce, increase in phosphate content, increase in zinc content, increase in antioxidant content. with the help in saline conditions. So in conclusion, I would like to say that use of PGPR can be a solution to combat climate change, to increase soil productivity, to cause soil bioremediation, to increase productivity, to increase the quality of crop. So many solutions can be provided, and we should shift over from chemicals, agrochemicals to these methods. You see, we are also doing experiments on wheat, on coriander, on several other things, several other crops. We are doing experiments, publications. All this work is published. So this is my takeaway from this. What I would like to say to you all, that we should improve. We should go for these PGPRs to improve. They are so versatile. They have so many activities. They have so many positives. I can tell you, just they can increase the crop yield. They can increase the productivity of saline soils. They can cause bioremediation of soils, saline soils. They can help in combating climate change. This is one of our book series which is going on at present. Already around 25 volumes are published in last 3 years in this book series. So this is a journal which I am editor-in-chief of. This is the Journal of Springer Nature, Environmental Sustainability. So all of you who want to contribute your manuscripts, your articles into this journal are welcome. This is another research topics on salt tolerance, which is active at present in Frontiers in Microbiology. I am editor of this research topic also, Frontiers in Microbiology. And this is my research team, which we are doing experiments, which help me, my research scholars and all. So I hope the lecture, you enjoyed the lecture and got some benefits out of it. So Govind.
Thank you, sir. A very good and informative lecture given by you, sir, and lots of participants given questions. But due to shortage of time, I little bit only 1 or 2 question allow. So, sir, kindly elaborate why PGPR shows sometimes inconsistent result in field condition.
Yeah. Repeat.
Why PGPR show sometimes inconsistent results
inconsistent
in the
results.
Consistent.
Yes,
Inconsistent results.
in
You know,
field condition. Yes.
yeah. You know, over the time when we isolate these PGPR in our laboratory, we cultivate them in laboratory. So over the time, sometimes they lose their characters. They lose some properties. Their genes become inactive because they do not require those stress. In laboratory conditions, there is no stress. There is no requirement for example, if you grow rhizobium on yeast extract mannitol agar, it doesn't require to fix nitrogen. So nitrogenase or NIF gene, it is not necessary for the bacteria to fix nitrogen on yeast extract mannitol agar. So sometimes what happens is these activities they lose in the laboratory. I explain it to my students. अगर मैं हिंदी में बताऊं ना, तो क्या होता है कि कई बार आप किसी को लेके आओ कहीं छोटे शहर से या गांव से, वो 5 स्टार होटल में रहे 1 साल तक, उसके बाद उसकी वो आदत बदल जाएंगी, फिर उसको वापस वो गांव में लेके जाओगे तो उसका रहना मुश्किल हो जाएगा। वो बिना एसी के, बिना अच्छा खाने के कैसे रहेगा? तो ये बैक्टीरिया वैसे ही हैं। अब उनको हम एक बार लैब में ले आते हैं, बड़ी अच्छी कंडीशंस देते हैं, बहुत अच्छे से सब पाल पोस के रखते हैं, उनको बढ़िया फूड मिलता है, बढ़िया टेम्परेचर, जैसे हम एसी में रहते हैं 28 डिग्री 27 डिग्री पे मेंटेन रखेंगे, तो वो कैरेक्टर्स कई बार लूज कर देते हैं। इसलिए हमेशा मैं तो ये मानता हूँ, हो सकता है प्रोफेसर सर अनिल प्रकाश सर भी एग्री करें, कि फील्ड में जो बैक्टीरिया, हमें हमेशा सर्च करते रहना चाहिए फील्ड्स, तो हमें अच्छे स्ट्रेन मिलते रहेंगे। थैंक यू सर। तो हमें अच्छे स्ट्रेन मिलते रहेंगे। कई साइंटिस्ट का ये होता है कि वो बस एक बार स्ट्रेन ले आए, उसी के सब जीन ढूंढ रहे हैं, वो सब डीएनए और वो सब नए स्ट्रेन ढूंढ ही नहीं रहे। बट इतनी बायोडाइवर्सिटी है, अभी तो हमने 1% भी नहीं ढूंढे, तो हमें वो कंटिन्यूअस प्रयास करते रहना चाहिए नए स्ट्रेन ढूंढने का। That is what I suggest. A second thing is about quality. Second thing is about quality. Several of these industries which make bioformulations, which make bioinoculants, which make biofertilizers, they do not follow the correct norms. The quality of bioinoculants is very poor in several times, so they do not work properly in the in the fields. Mute and mute. Govind, mute.
So due to lack of shortage of time, next lecture will be begin from 10 minutes. So I will bind up and all the questions present by participants will send to you and the participants will get by email the answer of these questions. So my sincerely thank to Professor Naveen Kumar Arora sir for giving a very informative and nice lecture. And he told about the challenges of food security and increase in soil salinity due to faulty practices and climate change. He told mechanism of plant microbe interaction during abiotic stress and other mechanism. He discussed about two strain EK1 and another PF23 strain showed biocontrol activity against various plant pathogens under saline conditions. He also described success story from unfertile soil to fertile soil. So this is a very good opportunity to farmers to develop the soil to fertile by using this strain. He also described a very excellent method for testing of indole stick acid, Citro4 production test, 96 test by using single microtiter plate. And my sincerely thanks to Professor Naveen Arora sir for giving extreme information regarding development of sustainable agriculture. And all the participants' messages showed the very nice and informative section present here. And Professor Anil Prakash sir, if you given some words.
It is very nice lecture given by the Professor Naveen, and he is a young and dynamic researcher, and he has developed so many success stories, and he has also means editor of so many books and journal. So he is a very good researcher, dynamic researcher. So we must take the advantage of Dr. Naveen for doing further research in this field, particularly in the field of PGPR. So I'm thankful to him for such a nice lecture given by Naveen Karun. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So now I would like to give thanks to our speakers, our mentors, Professor Anil Prakash sir and Dr. Bhim Pratap Singh sir, all the participants, and also thanks to Honorable Chancellor Engineer Sanjeev Agrawal, Pro Chancellor Dr. Prasad Jain sir, our Executive Director Ms. Shivani Agrawal ma'am, Sakshi Agrawal ma'am, and our energetic director, Dr. Ashish Datta sir. I must mention our deep sense for appreciation to Professor Sudhir Srivastava sir, Dr. Sandeep Srivastava sir, Dharmen sir, Rahul sir, Hari sir, Aditi ma'am, and all the team of Sagians for enthusiastic support. All the participants, also thank you to all for encouraging to organize this event, and your participation is very energetic to attend this session. Thank you all. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Naveen sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Govind.